here with food descriptions. Yay, I'm so excited. Hello, how's it going? I was just testing the things. Make sure it's going well and doing the things they're supposed to. All right. Think it's good. All right, there we go. CS, how's it going? It's fine, even. Yeah, it's going to be, it shouldn't be spoopy. It's going to be a bit more, honestly, I'm not quite sure. I think there's going to be a little bit of drama, but it's also going to be feel good. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. La da da dum. So yes, I wanted to do something particularly November-y, harvesty, Thanksgiving-y. And this is what I found. Because there's not a whole lot that is in the public domain that's specifically kind of what I wanted it to be. So hopefully this is good. It's by and this is an old fashioned Thanksgiving by Louisa Alcott, who wrote Little Women. Um, so yeah, might have a little what's the word? Oh god, what's her name? Austen-esque drama, but also I don't know, propriety, and yeah. You'll do your best to pay attention, even though you're also in a group call. Okay, sounds good. I hope at some point that it makes you either gasp or laugh or something, and you have to be sheepishly like, oh, I'm sorry. Not totally not doing something else at the same time. I hope the group call goes well. And I was looking at it, and I think it might actually be shorter than I anticipated it. So if it does end up being fairly short, we might be looking up some other like classical like feast descriptions to satiate my need. Because it's so good when food is written well. I'm a sucker for that. So yes. So this is from a collection called Aunt Joe's Scrap Bag. That's what that means. And so this is the short story of An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving by Louisa May Alcott. 60 years ago, up among the New Hampshire hills, lived Farmer Bassett, with a house full of sturdy sons and daughters growing up about him. They were poor in money, but rich in land and love, for the wide acres of wood, corn, and pasture land fed, warmed, and clothed the flock, while mutual patience, affection, and courage made the old farmhouse a very happy home. November had come, the crops were in, and barn, buttery, and bin were overflowing with the harvest that rewarded the summer's hard work. The big kitchen was a jolly place just now, for in the great fireplace roared a cheerful fire. On the walls hung garlands of dried apples, onions, and corn. Up aloft from the beams shone crook-necked squashes, juicy hams, and dried venison. For in those days deer still haunted the deep forests, and hunters flourished. Savory smells were in the air. On the crane hung steaming kettles, and down among the red embers copper saucepans simmered, all suggestive of some approaching feast. A white-headed baby lay in the old blue cradle that had rocked 7 other babies, now and then lifting his head to look out, like a round, full moon, then subsided to kick and crow contentedly, and suck the rosy apple he had no teeth to bite. 2 small boys sat on the wooden settle shelling corn for popping, and picking out the biggest nuts from the goodly store their own hands had gathered in October. 4 young girls stood at the long dresser, busily chopping meat, pounding spice, and slicing apples, and the tongues of Tilly, Prue, Roxy, and Rhodey went as fast as their hands. Farmer Bassett and F, the oldest boy, were chorin' round outside, for Thanksgiving was at hand, and all must be in order for that time-honored day. To and fro, from table to hearth, bustled buxom Mrs. Bassett, flushed and flowery, but busy and blithe as the queen bee of this busy little hive should be. That was some great alliteration. I do like to begin seasonable and have things to my mind. Thanksgiving dinners can't be drove, and it does take a sight of victuals to fill all these hungry stomachs, said the good woman, as she gave a vigorous stir to the great kettle of cider applesauce and cast a glance of housewifely pride at the fine array of pies set forth on the buttery shelves. Oh, yes, the food. Only one more day, and then it will be time to eat. I didn't take but one bowl of hasty pudding this morning, so I shall have plenty of room when the nice things come, confided Seth to Sol, as he cracked a large hazelnut as easily as a squirrel. No need of my starving beforehand. I always have room enough, and I'd like to have Thanksgiving every day, answered Solomon, gloating like a young ogre over the little pig that lay nearby, ready for roasting. Sakes alive, I don't, boys. It's a marcy it don't come but once a year. I should be worn to a thread paper with all this extra work atop of my winter weavin' and spinnin', laughed their mother, as she plunged her plump arms into the long bread trough and began to knead the dough as if a famine was at hand. Tilly, the oldest girl, a red-cheeked, black-eyed lass of 14, was grinding briskly at the mortar, for spices were costly, and not a grain must be wasted. Prue kept time with the chopper, and the twins sliced away at the apples till their little brown arms ached, for all knew how to work, and did so now with a will. I think it's real fun to have Thanksgiving at home. I'm sorry Grandma is sick, so we can't go there as usual, but I like to mess around here, don't you girls? Asked Tilly, pausing to take a sniff at the spicy pestle. Pestle? Mortar and pestle. One of the two. It will be kind of lonesome with only our own folks. I like to see all the cousins and aunts and have games and sing, cried the twins, who were regular little romps and could run, swim, coast, and shout as well as their brothers. I don't care a mite for all that. It will be so nice to eat dinner together, warm and comfortable at home, said quiet Prue, who loved her own cozy nooks like a cat. Same. Come, girls, fly round and get your chores done, so we can clear away for dinner just as soon as I clap my bread into the oven, called Mrs. Bassett presently, as she rounded off the last loaf of brown bread, which was to feed the hungry mouths that seldom tasted any other. Here's a man coming up the hill lively. Guess it's Gad Hopkins. Pa told him to bring a dozen oranges, if they weren't too high, shouted Sol and Seth, running to the door, while the girls smacked their lips at the thought of this rare treat, and Baby threw his apple overboard, as if getting ready for a new cargo. But all were doomed to disappointment, for it was not Gad with the much-desired fruit. It was a stranger, who threw himself off his horse and hurried up to Mr. Bassett in the yard, with some brief message that made the farmer drop his axe and look so sober that his wife guessed at once some bad news had come, and crying, "Mother's wuss? Mother's wuss! I know she is!" Out ran the good woman, forgetful of the flour on her arms and the oven waiting for its most important batch. The man said old Mr. Chadwick, down to Keene, stopped him as he passed, and told him to tell Mrs. Bassett her mother was failin' fast, and she'd better come today. He knew no more, and having delivered his errand, he rode away, saying it looked like snow and he must be jogging, or he wouldn't get home till night. We must go right off, Eldad. Hitch up, and I'll be ready in less than no time, said Mrs. Bassett, wasting not a minute in tears and lamentations, but pulling off her apron as she went in, with her mind in a sad jumble of bread, anxiety, turkey, sorrow, haste, and cider applesauce. A few words told the story, and the children left their work to help her get ready, mingling their grief for Grandma with regrets for the lost dinner. I'm dreadful sorry, dears, but it can't be helped. I couldn't cook nor eat no way now, and if that blessed woman gets better sudden, as she has before, we'll have cause for Thanksgiving, and I'll give you a dinner you won't forget in a hurry, said Mrs. Bassett, as she tied on her brown silk pumpkin hood, with a sob for the good old mother who had made it for her. Oh, sad. Not a child complained after that, but ran about helpfully, bringing moccasins, heating the footstone, and getting ready for a long drive, because Grandma lived 20 miles away, and there were no railroads in those parts to whisk people to and fro like magic. By the time the old yellow sleigh was at the door, the bread was in the oven, and Mrs. Bassett was waiting, with her camlet cloak on, and the baby done up like a small bale of blankets. Now, F, you must look after the cattle like a man, and keep up the fires, for there's a storm brewin', and neither the children nor dumb critters must suffer, said Mr. Bassett, as he turned up the collar of his rough coat and put on his blue mittens, while the old mare shook her bells as if she preferred a trip to Keene to hauling wood all day. Tilly put extra Put extra comfortables on the beds tonight. The wind is so searchin' up chamber. Have the baked beans and Injun pudding for dinner, and whatever you do, don't let the boys get at the mince pies, or you'll have them down sick. I shall come back the minute I can leave mother. Pa will come tomorrow anyway, so keep snug and be good. I depend on you, my darter. Use your judgment and don't let nothing happen while mother's away. Yes'm, goodbye, called the children, as Mrs. Bassett was packed into the sleigh and driven away, leaving a stream of directions behind her. F, the 16-year-old boy, immediately put on his biggest boots, assumed a sober, responsible manner, and surveyed his little responsibilities with a paternal air, drolly like his father's. Tilly tied on her mother's bunch of keys, rolled up the sleeves of her homespun gown, and began to order about the younger girls. They soon forgot poor Granny, and found it great fun to keep house all alone, for mother seldom left home, but ruled her family in the good old-fashioned way. There were no servants, for the little daughters were Mrs. Bassett's only maids, and the stout boys helped their father, all working happily together with no wages but love, learning in the best manner the use of the heads and hands with which they were to make their own way in the world. The few flakes that caused the farmer to predict bad weather soon increased to a regular snowstorm, with gusts of wind, for up among the hills winter came early and lingered long. But the children were busy, gay, and warm indoors, and never minded the rising gale nor the whirling white storm outside. Tilly got them a good dinner, and when it was over, the two elder girls went to their spinning, for in the kitchen stood the big and little wheels, and baskets of wool rolls ready to be twisted into yarn for the winter's knitting, and each day brought its stint of work to the daughters, who hoped to be as thrifty as their mother. F kept up a glorious fire and superintended the small boys, who popped corn and whittled boats on the hearth, while Roxy and Rhodey dressed corncob dolls in the settle corner, and Bose, the brindled mastiff, lay on the braided mat, luxuriously warming his old legs. Thus employed, they made a pretty picture, these rosy boys and girls, in their homespun suits, with the rustic toys or tasks which most children nowadays would find very poor or tiresome. And this is in, late 1800s. Tilly and Prue sang as they stepped to and fro, drawing out the smoothly twisted threads to the musical hum of the great spinning wheels. The little girls chattered like magpies over their dolls and the new bedspread they were planning to make, all white dimity stars on a blue calico ground, as a Christmas present to Ma. The boys roared at F's jokes and had rough and tumble games over Bose, who didn't mind them in the least, and so the afternoon wore pleasantly away. At sunset, the boys went out to feed the cattle, bring in heaps of wood, and lock up for the night, as the lonely farmhouse seldom had visitors after dark. The girls got the simple supper of brown bread and milk, baked apples, and a donut all round as a treat. Then they sat before the fire, the sisters knitting, the brothers with books or games, for F loved reading, and Sol and Seth never failed to play a few games of Morris with barleycorns on the little board they had made themselves at one corner of the dresser. "Read out a piece," said Tilly, from Mother's chair, where she sat in state, finishing off the 6th woolen sock she had knit that month. "It's the old history book, but here's a bit you may like, since it's about our folks," answered F, turning the yellow page to look at a picture of two quaintly dressed children in some ancient castle. "Yes, read that. I always like to hear about the Lady Matilde I was named for, and Lord Bassett, Pa's great-great-great-grandpa. He's only a farmer now, but it's nice to know that we were somebody 200 or 300 years ago," said Tilly, bridling and tossing her curly head as she fancied the Lady Matilda might have done. "Don't read the queer words, 'cause we don't understand 'em. Tell it," commanded Roxy from the cradle, where she was drowsily cuddled with Rhodey. "Well, a long time ago, when Charles I was in prison, Lord Bassett was a true friend to him," began F, plunging into his story without delay. "The Lord had some papers that would have hung a lot of people if the king's enemies got hold of 'em. So when he heard one day, all of a sudden, that soldiers were at the castle gate to carry him off, he had just time to call his girl to him and say, I may be going to my death, but I won't betray my master. There is no time to burn the papers, and I cannot take them with me. They are hidden in the old leathern chair where I sit. No one knows this but you, and you must guard them till I come, or send you a safe messenger to take them away. Promise me to be brave and silent, and I can go without fear. You see, he wasn't afraid to die, but he was to seem a traitor. Lady Matilde promised solemnly, and the words were hardly out of her mouth when the men came in, and her father was carried away a prisoner and sent off to the tower. But she didn't cry. She just called her brother and sat down in that chair with her head leaning back on those papers like a queen, and waited while the soldiers hunted the house over for him. Wasn't that a smart girl? Cried Tilly, beaming with pride, for she was named for this ancestress and knew the story by heart. I reckon she was scared, though, when the men came swearing in and asked her if she knew anything about it. The boy did his part then, for he didn't know, and fired up and stood before his sister. And he says he, as bold as a lion, if my lord had told us where the papers be, we would die before we would betray him. But we are children, and know nothing, and it is cowardly of you to try to fright us with oaths and drawn swords. As F quoted from the book, Seth planted himself before Tilly with the long poker in his hand, saying, as he flourished it valiantly, "Why didn't the boy take his father's sword and lay about him? I would, if anyone was hash to Tilly. You bantam. He was only a bit of a boy and couldn't do anything." "Sit down and hear the rest of it," commanded Tilly, with a pat on the yellow head, and a private resolve that Seth should have the largest piece of pie at dinner next day, as reward for his chivalry. So cute. Well, the men went off after turning the castle out of window, but they said they should come again, so faithful Matilde was full of trouble, and hardly dared to leave the room where the chair stood. All day she sat there, and at night her sleep was so full of fear about it that she often got up and went to see that all was safe. Oh no, what have I done? No, we're good, sorry. Ugh. All day she sat there, and at night her sleep was so full of fear about it that she often got up and went to see that all was safe. The servants thought the fright had hurt her wits, and let her be, but Rupert, the boy, stood by her and never was afraid of her queer ways. She was a pious maid, the book says, and often spent the long evenings reading the Bible, with her brother by her, all alone in the great room, with no one to help her bear her secret, and no good news of her father. At last, word came that the king was dead, and his friends banished out of England. Then the poor children were in a sad plight, for they had no mother, and the servants all ran away, leaving only one faithful old man to help them. "But the father did come," cried Roxy eagerly. "You'll see," continued F, half telling, half reading. Matilda was sure he would, so she sat on in the big chair, guarding the papers, and no one could get her away, till one day a man came with her father's ring and told her to give up the secret. She knew the ring, but would not tell until she had asked many questions, so as to be very sure, and while the man answered all about her father and the king, she looked at him sharply. Then she stood up and said, in a tremble, for there was something strange about the man, "Sir, I doubt you in spite of the ring, and I will not answer till you pull out the false beard you wear, that I may see your face and know if you are my father's friend or foe." Off came the disguise, and Matilda found it was my lord himself, come to take them with him out of England. He was very proud of that faithful girl, I guess, for the old chair still stands in the castle, and the name keeps in the family, Pa says, even over here, where some of the Bassets came along with the Pilgrims. Our Tilly would have been as brave, I know, and she looks like the old picture down to sorry, she looks like the old picture down to Grandma's, don't she, F? Cried Prue, who admired her bold, bright sister very much. "Well, I think you do the settin' part best, Prue. You are so patient. Till would fight like a wild cat, but she can't hold her tongue worth a cent," answered F, whereat Tilly pulled his hair, and the story ended with a general frolic. When the moon-faced clock behind the door struck 9, Tilly tucked up the children under the extra comfortables and having kissed them all around, as Mother did, crept into her own nest, never minding the little drifts of snow that sifted in upon her coverlet between the shingles of the roof, nor the storm that raged without. As if he felt the need of unusual vigilance, old Bose lay down on the mat before the door, and Pussy had the warm hearth all to herself. If any late wanderer had looked in at midnight, he would have seen the fire blazing up again, and in the cheerful glow the old cat blinking her yellow eyes as she sat bolt upright beside the spinning wheel, like some sort of household goblin, guarding the children while they slept. When they woke, like early birds, it still snowed, but up the little Bassets jumped, broke the ice in their pitchers, and went down with cheeks glowing like winter apples after a brisk scrub and scramble into their clothes. F was off to the barn, and Tilly soon had a great kettle of mush ready, which, with milk warm from the cows, made a wholesome breakfast for the 7 hearty children. "Now, about dinner," said the young housekeeper, as the pewter spoons stopped clattering and the earthen bowls stood empty. "Ma said have what we liked, but she didn't expect us to have a real Thanksgiving dinner, because she won't be here to cook it, and we don't know how," began Prue doubtfully. "I can roast a turkey and make a pudding as well as anybody, I guess. The pies are all ready, and if we can't boil vegetables and so on, we don't deserve any dinner," cried Tilly, burning to distinguish herself and bound to enjoy to the utmost her brief authority. "Yes, yes," cried all the boys. "Let's have a dinner anyway. Ma won't care, and the good victuals will spoil if they ain't eaten right up. Pa is coming tonight, so we won't have dinner till late. That will be real genteel and give us plenty of time," added Tilly, suddenly realizing the novelty of the task she had undertaken. "Did you ever roast a turkey?" asked Roxy with an air of deep interest. "Should you darst to try?" said Rhodey in an awe-stricken tone. "You will see what I can do. Ma said I was to use my judgment about things, and I'm going to. All you children have got to do is to keep out of the way and let Prue and me work. F, I wish you'd put a fire in the best room so the little ones can play in there. We shall want the settin' room for the table, and I won't have 'em pickin' round when we get things fixed," commanded Tilly, bound to make her short reign a brilliant one. "I don't know about that. Ma didn't tell us to," began cautious F, who felt that this invasion of the sacred best parlor was a daring step. "Don't we always do it Sundays and Thanksgivings? Wouldn't Ma wish the children kept safe and warm anyhow? Can I get up a nice dinner with 4 rascals under my feet all the time? Come now, if you want roast turkey and onions, plum puddin' and mince pie, you'll have to do as I tell you, and be lively about it." Tilly spoke with such spirit, and her last suggestion was so irresistible, that F gave in, and laughing good-naturedly, tramped away to heat up the best room, devoutly hoping that nothing serious would happen to punish such audacity. The young folks delightedly trooped in to destroy the order of that prim apartment with housekeeping under the black horsehair sofa, horseback riders on the arms of the best rocking chair, and an Indian war dance all over the well-waxed furniture. F, finding the society of the peaceful sheep and cows more to his mind than that of 2 excited sisters, lingered over his chores in the barn as long as possible and left the girls in peace. Now Tilly and Prue were in their glory, and as soon as the breakfast things were out of the way, they prepared for a grand cooking time. They were handy girls, though they had never heard of a cooking school, never touched a piano, and knew nothing of embroidery beyond the samplers which hung framed in the parlor, one ornamented with a pink mourner under a blue weeping willow, the other with this pleasing verse, each word being done in a different color, which gave the effect of a distracted rainbow. This sampler neat was worked by me, in my 12th year, Prudence B. Both rolled up their sleeves, put on their largest aprons, and got out all the spoons, dishes, pots, and pans they could find, so as to have everything handy, as Prue said. "Now, sister, we'll have dinner at 5. Pa will be here by that time, if he is coming tonight, and be so surprised to find us all ready, for he won't have had any very nice victuals if Grandma is so sick," said Tilly importantly. "I shall give the children a piece at noon." Tilly meant luncheon. "Donuts and cheese, with apple pie and cider will please 'em. There's beans for F. He likes cold pork, so we won't stop to warm it up, for there's lots to do, and I don't mind saying to you I'm dreadful dubersome about the turkey. Oh no! It's all ready but the stuffing, and roasting is as easy as can be. I can baste first rate. Ma always likes to have me. I'm so patient and stiddy, she says," answered Prue, for the responsibility of this great undertaking did not rest upon her, so she took a cheerful view of things. "I know, but it's the stuffin' that troubles me," said Tilly, rubbing her round elbows as she eyed the immense fowl laid out on a platter before her. "I don't know how much I want, nor what sort of yarbs to put in, and he's so awful big, I'm kind of afraid of him." "Oh, no, I ain't. I fed him all summer, and he never gobbled at me. I feel real mean to be thinking of gobbling him, poor old chap," laughed Prue, patting her departed pet with an air of mingled affection and appetite. "Don't listen, chicken." "Oh, no. Well, I'll get the puddin' off my mind fust, for it ought to bile all day. Put the big kettle on and see that the spit is clean while I get ready." I apologize for not having a consistent accent for this. Prue obediently tugged away at the crane with its black hooks, from which hung the iron tea kettle and three-legged pot. Then she settled the long spit in the grooves made for it in the tall andirons, and put the dripping pan underneath, for in those days meat was roasted as it should be, not baked in ovens. Meantime, Tilly attacked the plum pudding. She felt pretty sure of coming out right here, for she had seen her mother do it so many times it looked very easy. So in went suet and fruit, all sorts of spice, to be sure she got the right ones, and brandy instead of wine. But she forgot both sugar and salt, and tied it in the cloth so tightly that it had no room to swell, so it would come out as heavy as lead and as hard as a cannonball if the bag did not burst and spoil it all. Happily unconscious of these mistakes, Tilly popped it into the pot and proudly watched it bobbing about before she put the cover on and left it to its fate. Oh no! "I can't remember what flavorin' Ma puts in," she said, when she had got her bread well soaked for the stuffing. "Sage and onions and applesauce go with goose, but I can't feel sure of anything but pepper and salt for a turkey. Ma puts in some kind of mint, I know, but I forget whether it is spearmint, peppermint, or pennyroyal," answered Prue in a tone of doubt, but trying to show her knowledge of the yarbs, or at least of their names. "Seemed to me it's sweet marjoram or summer savory. I guess we'll put both in, and then we are sure to be right. The best is up garret. You run and get some while I mash the bread," commanded Tilly, diving into the mess. Away trotted Prue, but in her haste she got catnip and wormwood, for the garret was darkish, and Prue's little nose was so full of the smell of the onions she had been peeling that everything smelt of them. Eager to be of use, she pounded up the herbs and scattered the mixture with a liberal hand into the bowl. Oh no! "It doesn't smell just right, but I suppose it will when it is cooked," said Tilly, as she filled the empty stomach that seemed aching for food, and sewed it up with the blue yarn, which happened to be handy. She forgot to tie down his legs and wings, but she set him by till his hour came, well satisfied with her work. "Shall we roast the little pig, too? I think he'd look nice with a necklace of sausages, as Ma fixed one last Christmas," asked Prue, elated with their success. "Oh, no. I couldn't do it. I loved that little pig and cried when he was killed. I should feel as if I was roasting the baby." "Oh, God," answered Tilly, glancing toward the buttery where Piggy hung, looking so pink and pretty, it certainly did seem cruel to eat him. Oh, no. It took a long time to get all the vegetables ready, for, as the cellar was full, the girls thought they would have every sort. F helped, and by noon all was ready for cooking, and the cranberry sauce, a good deal scorched, was cooling in the lean-to. Luncheon was a lively meal, and doughnuts and cheese vanished in such quantities that Tilly feared no one would have an appetite for her sumptuous dinner. The boys assured her they would be starving by 5 o'clock, and Sol mourned bitterly over the little pig that was not to be served up. "Now you all go and coast while Prue and I set the table and get out the best Chiney," said Tilly, bent on having her dinner look well, no matter what its other failings might be. Out came the rough sleds, on went the round hoods, old hats, red cloaks, and moccasins, and away trudged the 4 younger Bassets to disport themselves in the snow and try the ice down by the old mill, where the great wheel turned and splashed so merrily in the summertime. Eph took his fiddle and scraped away to his heart's content in the parlor, while the girls, after a short rest, set the table and made all ready to dish up the dinner when that exciting moment came. It was not at all the sort of table we see now, but would look very plain and countrified to us, with its green-handled knives and 2-pronged steel forks, its red and white china and pewter platters scoured till they shone, with mugs and spoons to match, and a brown jug for the cider. The cloth was coarse, but white as snow, and the little maids had seen the blue-eyed flax grow, out of which their mother wove the linen they had watched and watered while it bleached in the green meadow. They had no napkins and little silver, but the best tankard and Ma's few wedding spoons were set forth in state. Nuts and apples at the corners gave an air, and the place of honor was left in the middle for the oranges yet to come. "Don't it look beautiful?" said Prue, when they paused to admire the general effect. "Pretty nice, I think. I wish Ma could see how well we can do it," began Tilly, when a loud howling startled both girls and sent them flying to the window. The short afternoon had passed so quickly that twilight had come before they knew it, and now, as they looked out through the gathering dusk, they saw 4 small black figures tearing up the road to come bursting in, all screaming at once, "The bear! The bear! F, get the gun! He's coming! He's coming!" Oh no. F had dropped his fiddle and got down his gun before the girls could calm the children enough to tell their story, which they did in a somewhat incoherent manner. "Down in the holler, coastin', we heard a growl," began Sol, with his eyes as big as saucers. "I see him fust looking over the wall," roared Seth, eager to get his share of honor. "Awful big and shaggy," quavered Roxy, clinging to Tilly, while Rhodey hid in Prue's skirts and piped out, "His great paws kept clawing at us, and I was so scared my legs would hardly go. We ran away as fast as we could go, and he came growling after us. He's awful hungry, and he'll eat every one of us if he gets in," continued Sol, looking about him for a safe retreat. "Oh, F, don't let him eat us," cried both little girls, flying upstairs to hide under their mother's bed as their surest shelter. "No danger of that, you little geese. I'll shoot him as soon as he comes. Get out of the way, boys." And F raised the window to get good aim. "There he is! Fire away and don't miss!" cried Seth, hastily following Sol, who had climbed to the top of the dresser as a good perch from which to view the approaching fray. Prue retired to the hearth, as if bent on dying at her post rather than desert the turkey, now browning beautiful, as she expressed it. But Tilly boldly stood at the open window, ready to lend a hand if the enemy proved too much for F. All had seen bears, but none had ever come so near before, and even brave F felt that the big brown beast slowly trotting up the dooryard was an unusually formidable specimen. He was growling horribly and stopped now and then as if to rest and shake himself. "Get the axe, Tilly, and if I should miss, stand ready to keep him off while I load again," said F, anxious to kill his first bear in style and alone. A girl's help didn't count. Tilly flew for the axe and was at her brother's side by the time the bear was near enough to be dangerous. He stood on his hind legs and seemed to sniff with relish the savory odors that poured out of the window. "Fire, F!" cried Tilly firmly. "Wait till he rears again. I'll get a better shot then," answered the boy, while Prue covered her ears to shut out the bang, and the small boys cheered from their dusty refuge up among the pumpkins. But a very singular thing happened next, and all who saw it stood amazed. For suddenly, Tilly threw down the axe, flung open the door, and ran straight into the arms of the bear, who stood erect to receive her, while his growlings changed to a loud ha ha that startled the children more than the report of a gun. "It's Gad Hopkins trying to fool us, who almost got shot," cried F, much disgusted at the loss of his prey, for these hardy boys loved to hunt, and prided themselves on the number of wild animals and birds they could shoot in a year. "Oh, Gad, how could you scare us so?" laughed Tilly, still held fast in one shaggy arm of the bear, while the other drew a dozen oranges from some deep pocket in the buffalo skin coat and fired them into the kitchen with such good aim that F ducked, Prue screamed, and Sol and Seth came down much quicker than they went up. "Well, you see, I got oh God, I'll try. You see, I got upset over yonder, and the old horse went home while I was floundering in a drift, so I tied on the buffalers to tote 'em easy, and come along till I see the children playin' in the holler. I jest meant to give 'em a little scare, but they run like partridges, and I kept up the joke to see how F would like this sort of company." And Gad ha-ha'd again. You'd have had a warm welcome if we hadn't found you out. I'd have put a bullet through you in a jiffy, old chap," said F, coming out to shake hands with the young giant, who was only a year or two older than himself. "Come in and set up to dinner with us. Prue and I have done it all ourselves, and Pa will be along soon, I reckon," cried Tilly, trying to escape. "Couldn't, no ways. My folks will think I'm dead F. I'm dead F. Oh, dead. Sorry, my folks will think I'm dead if I don't get along home, almost were, since the horse and sleigh have gone ahead empty. I've done my errand and had my joke. Now I want my pay, Tilly," and Gad took a hearty kiss from the rosy cheeks of his little sweetheart, as he called her. His own cheeks tingled with the smart slap she gave him as she ran away, calling out that she hated bears and would bring her axe next time. "I ain't afeard. Your sharp eyes found me out, and if you run into a bear's arms, you must expect a hug," answered Gad, as he pushed back the robe and settled his fur cap more becomingly. "I should have known you in a minute if I hadn't been asleep when the girls squalled. You did it well, though, and I advise you not to try it again in a hurry, or you'll get shot," said F as they parted, he rather crestfallen and Gad in high glee. "My sakes alive, the turkey is burnt to one side, and the kettles have biled over, so the pies I put to warm are all ashes. No!" scolded Tilly, as the flurry subsided and she remembered her dinner. "Well, I can't help it. I can't help it. I couldn't think of victuals when I expected to be eaten alive myself, could I?" pleaded poor Prue, who had tumbled into the cradle when the rain of oranges began. Tilly laughed, and all the rest joined in, so good humor was restored, and the spirits of the younger ones were revived by sucks from the one orange which passed from hand to hand with great rapidity, while the older girls dished up the dinner. They were just struggling to get the pudding out of the cloth when Roxy called out, "Here's Pa." "There's folks with him," added Rhodey. "Lots of 'em. I see 2 big sleighs chock full," shouted Seth, peering through the dusk. "Oh, no. It looks like a cemetery. Guess Grandma's dead and come up to be buried here." "Oh," said Sol in a solemn tone. "Okay, sorry. It looks like a cemetery. Guess Grandma's dead and come up to be buried here," said Sol in a solemn tone. It still comes out rather blunt. This startling suggestion made Tilly, Prue, and F hasten to look out, full of dismay at such an ending of their festival. "If that is a funeral, the mourners are uncommon jolly," said F, dryly, as merry voices and loud laughter broke the white silence without. "I see Aunt Cynthia and Cousin Hetty, and there's Mose and Amos." "I do declare, Pa's bringing 'em all home to have some fun here," cried Prue, as she recognized one familiar face after another. Oh, my patience, ain't I glad I got dinner, and don't I hope it will turn out good, exclaimed Tilly, while the twins pranced with delight, and the small boys roared, Hooray for Pa! Hooray for Thanksgiving! The cheer was answered heartily, and in came father, mother, baby, aunts, and cousins, all in great spirits, and all much surprised to find such a festive welcome awaiting them. Ain't Grandma dead at all? Asked Sol in the midst of the kissing and handshaking. Bless your heart, no. It was all a mistake of old Mr. Chadwick's. He's as deaf as an adder, and when Mrs. Brooks told him Mother was mendin' fast, and she wanted me to come down today, certain sure, he got the message all wrong, and give it to the first person to the first person passing in such a way as to scare me most to death, and send us down in a hurry. Mother was sittin' up as chirk as you please, and dreadful sorry you didn't all come. So to keep the house quiet for her, and give you a taste of the fun, your pa fetched us all up to spend the evenin', and we are goin' to have a jolly time, Aunt, to judge by the looks of things, said Aunt Cynthia, briskly finishing the tale when Mrs. Bassett paused for want of breath. What in the world put it into your head we was comin' and set you to gettin' up such a supper? Asked Mr. Bassett, looking about him well pleased and much surprised at the plentiful table. Tilly modestly began to tell, but the others broke in and sang her praises in a sort of chorus in which bears, pigs, pies, and oranges were oddly mixed. Great satisfaction was expressed by all, and Tilly and Prue were so elated by the commendation of Ma and the aunts that they set forth their dinner, sure everything was perfect. Oh no! But when the eating began, which it did the moment wraps were off, then their pride got a fall. For the first person who tasted the stuffing, it was big Cousin Mose, and that made it harder to bear, nearly choked over the bitter morsel. Tilly Bassett, whatever made you put wormwood and catnip in your stuffin'? Demanded Ma, trying not to be severe, for all the rest were laughing, and Tilly looked ready to cry. I did it, said Prue, nobly taking all the blame, which caused Pa to kiss her on the spot, and declare that it didn't do a mite of harm, for the turkey was all right. I never see onions cooked better, and all the vegetables is well done, and the dinner a credit to you, my dears, declared Aunt Cynthia, with her mouth full of the fragrant vegetable she praised. The pudding was an utter failure, in spite of the blazing brandy in which it lay, as hard and heavy as one of the stone balls on Squire Duncan's great gate. It was speedily whisked out of sight, and all fell upon the pies, which were perfect. But Tilly and Prue were much depressed, and didn't recover their spirits till the dinner was over, and the evening fun well under way. Blind Man's Buff, Hunt the Slipper, Come Philander, and other lively games soon set everyone bubbling over with jollity, and when F struck up Money Musk on his fiddle, old and young fell into their places for a dance. All down the long kitchen they stood, Mr. and Mrs. Bassett at the top, the twins at the bottom, and then away they went, heeling and towing, cutting pigeon wings, and taking their steps in a way that would convulse modern children with their new-fangled romps called dancing. Mose and Tilly covered themselves with glory by the vigor with which they kept it up, till fat Aunt Cynthia fell into a chair, breathlessly declaring that a very little of such exercise was enough for a woman of her heft. Apples and cider, chat and singing finished the evening, and after a grand kissing all round, the guests drove away in the clear moonlight, which came just in time to cheer their long drive. When the jingle of the last bell had died away, Mr. Bassett said soberly, as they stood together on the hearth, Children, we have special cause to be thankful that the sorrow we expected was changed into joy, so we'll read a chapter before we go to bed and give thanks where thanks is due. Then Tilly set out the light stand with the big Bible on it, and a candle on each side, and all sat quietly in the firelight, smiling as they listened with happy hearts to the sweet old words that fit all times and seasons so beautifully. When the good nights were over and the children in bed, Prue put her arm around Tilly and whispered tenderly, for she felt her shake and was sure she was crying. Don't mind about the old stuffin' and puddin', dearie. Nobody cared, and Ma said we really did do surprisin' well for such young girls. The laughter Tilly was trying to smother broke out then and was so infectious Prue could not help joining her, even before she knew the cause of the merriment. I was mad about the mistakes, but don't care enough to cry. I'm laughing to think how Gad fooled F and I found him out. I thought Mose and Amos would have died over it when I told them. It was so funny, explained Tilly when she got her breath. I was so scared that when the first orange hit me, I thought it was a bullet and scrabbled into the cradle as fast as I could. It was real mean to frighten the little ones so, laughed Prue, as Tilly gave a growl. Here, a smart rap on the wall of the next room caused a sudden lull in the fun, and Mrs. Bassett's voice was heard, saying warningly, "Girls, go to sleep immediate, or you'll wake the baby." "Yes'm," answered two meek voices, and after a few irrepressible giggles, silence reigned, broken only by an occasional snore from the boys, or the soft scurry of mice in the buttery, taking their part in this old-fashioned Thanksgiving. End of the story. That was very, very short. Oh no. It was so good though. It's from its time. But it is all the talking about the food is so good, and the again, the food, the family, the feels. It was really good. There was a picture actually in the beginning. If I can find it. There was an illustration, and I didn't want to give it away because I saw it and I was like, oh, well, that's definitely a spoiler. So, yay, illustration. He's gonna shoot him. An old-fashioned Thanksgiving. Suddenly, Tilly threw down the axe, flung open the door, and ran straight into the arms of the bear. I thought it was going to be the dad, but apparently it was not. It was delivery of oranges. So yeah, that did. That definitely satiated my desire for delicious food. Descriptions. However, like I said, it was super short. I'm trying to figure out how best to potentially do this. Cause there's that's not what I wanted. Maybe this one? And yeah, just the description of everything, just how the family working together, and then the fact that, again, some of the things that they said, back then, it wasn't like today. And again, it was like late 1800s when they did this. So times have changed and not changed at the same time. Again, apologies for my terrible accent. I almost want to say it might be something of a southern accent, and I never really got that one down, so yeah. Otherwise, yeah, it's just, that's something that I do. I kind of like the old-fashioned stuff. Just the idea of it, the warmth, the light of it. It's the stuff you put in paintings. It's just the stuff you describe in literature. And yeah, it was good and it was nice. Kind of sad that the food didn't all go to plan, but you hear I don't know, it's just one of those things where it seems like nowadays if something goes wrong, it's like, oh, it's this big terrible thing, but they're just like, oh no, it's good, it's fine. We got all this stuff and now we're gonna have fun after this. It's no tragedy. So yeah, so that was nice. I mean, I don't know. I'm almost like, you just keep reading the next one, but I don't think it's gonna be as Thanksgiving-y. I see oranges, but no, I'll see if I can find some So yes, that was an old-fashioned Thanksgiving that took a lot less time than I thought it was going to. I apologize. Oops. So we'll see. The one that I kind of wanted to read, I'll see if I can find it. Oh. So basically, just best descriptions of feasts in classic literature is basically what we're gonna try and do here. The one, where is it? So it's the Count of Monte Cristo. Count of Monte Cristo. I almost said Crisco. Count of Monte Cristo. And I haven't read the book in a while. I absolutely loved the book. At some point, I actually I would like to read it on here at some point, just because it's that good. It does have a lot of stuff in it that is could be considered questionable. So yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure about doing that. So hopefully nothing is quite that way in here. I'll quick scroll through it, see how much it does. So it's an entire chapter, I believe, of within that book. I think most of the food is at the beginning, but I guess we'll potentially just read the first the whole chapter and see what happens, just in case there's more food stuff in it. Yeah, so I guess that's what we're doing now. I'll see. Oh, actually, I'll try and find it in here so I can actually put it up there. By Alexandre Dumas. Hopefully it comes out properly. So yeah, The Count of Monte Cristo is an incredibly good book. It has a lot of... Oh no, it's not gonna work. I might just have to... Alright, we're doing it a different way. We're gonna zoom in on this. Okay. And... Oh, actually. Zoom out a bit. Like that? That works. Let me get it at a proper thing, and then we shall commence more food reading. There. Okay. Oops. And again, I started learning French. However, my accent is probably not good. We'll just say it's not good. So, if you don't know the story of Count of Monte Cristo, I guess I don't want to spoil too much, but it's a tale of all sorts of things, of betrayal and second chances and violence, and what's the word, what's the word, oh god, richness, but in a different manner. Ostentatiousness. I don't know, it is, there's so many different stories, there's so many different people involved, and it like swaps between things, but it's all really well knit together. And it's just an incredibly great read. Um, one of my favorite lines. Okay, my favorite line. I need to put this on a T-shirt at some point. This this guy, one of the characters, walks into somebody's house, his buddy's house, and he's just like, "I'm hungry, feed me. I'm bored, amuse me." Like straight up. Everything else is like fairly proper, and he just up and says that, and I do just want that on a T-shirt, and it comes from this book. So it is. It's very good. It takes place in France. It has to because all of it is French. Um. So yeah. So we're gonna read chapter 63, "The Dinner," because it does a really good job of describing things, and it's very vivid and rich. So yeah, and we'll see what happens. I don't know where it's all gonna go, but it will. We'll get some foodness in there. So let me just make sure everything is working properly. Awesome, amazing. Okay. So, chapter 63, "The Dinner" of the Count of Monte Cristo. It was evident that one sentiment affected all the guests on entering the dining room. Each one, "I'm doing great. Oh, thank you. Hope your call is going or went well." But I did. I thought that was going to go a lot longer, but we will. Well, we'll see. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's not a whole lot of good reading material for Thanksgiving stuff, but yeah. So thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here and enjoying it, I guess. So, okay. It was evident that one sentiment affected all the guests on entering the dining room. Each one asked what strange influence had brought them to this house, and yet astonished, even uneasy though they were, they still felt that they would not like to be absent. The recent events, the solitary and eccentric position of the Count, his enormous, nay, almost incredible fortune, should have made men cautious, and have altogether prevented ladies visiting a house where there was no one of their own sex to receive them. And yet curiosity had been enough to lead them to overleap the bounds of prudence and decorum, and all present, even including Cavalcanti and his son, notwithstanding the stiffness of the one and the carelessness of the other, were thoughtful, on finding themselves assembled at the house of this incomprehensible man. Madame Danglars had started when Villefort, on the Count's invitation, offered his arm, and Villefort felt that his glance was uneasy beneath his gold spectacles, when he felt the arm of the Baroness press upon his own. None of this had escaped the Count, and even by this mere contact of individuals, the scene had already acquired considerable interest for an observer. M. de Villefort had on the right hand Madame Danglars, on his left Morrel. The Count was seated between Madame de Villefort and Danglars. The other seats were filled by Debray, who was placed between the two Cavalcanti, and by Chateau Renaud, seated between Madame de Villefort and Morrel. The repast was magnificent. Monte Cristo had endeavored completely to overturn the Parisian ideas, and to feed the curiosity as much as the appetite of his guests. It was an oriental feast that he offered to them, but of such a kind as the Arabian fairies might be supposed to prepare. Every delicious fruit that the 4 quarters of the globe could provide was heaped in vases from China and jars from Japan. Rare birds, retaining their most brilliant plumage, enormous fish, spread upon massive silver dishes, together with every wine produced in the archipelago, Asia Minor, or the Cape, sparkling in bottles whose grotesque shape seemed to give an additional flavor to the draught. All these, like one of the displays with which Apicius of old gratified his guests, passed in review before the eyes of the astonished Parisians, who understood that it was possible to expend 1,000 louis upon a dinner for 10 persons, but only on the condition of eating pearls, like Cleopatra, or drinking refined gold, like Lorenzo de Medici. Monte Cristo noticed the general astonishment, and began laughing and joking about it. "Gentlemen," he said, "you will admit that, when arrived at a certain degree of fortune, the superfluities of life are all that can be desired, and the ladies will allow that, after having risen to a certain eminence of position, the ideal alone can be more exalted. Now, to follow out this reasoning, what is the marvelous? That which we do not understand. What is it that we really desire? That which we cannot obtain. Now, to see things which I cannot understand, to procure impossibilities, these are the study of my life. I gratify my wishes by two means, my will and my money. I take as much interest in the pursuit of some whim as you do, M. Danglars, in promoting a new railway line, you, M. de Villefort, in condemning a culprit to death, you, M. de Bray, in pacifying a kingdom, you, M. de Chateau Renaud, in pleasing a woman, and you, Morrel, in breaking a horse that no one can ride. For example, you see these two fish. One brought 50 leagues beyond St. Petersburg, the other 5 leagues from Naples. Is it not amusing to see them both on the same table? What are the two fish? Asked Danglars. M. Chateau Renaud, who has lived in Russia, will tell you the name of one, and Major Cavalcanti, who is an Italian, will tell you the name of the other. This one is, I think, a sterlet, said Chateau Renaud. Renaud. And that one, if I mistake not, a lamprey. Just so. Now, M. Danglars, ask these gentlemen where they are caught. Starlets, said Oh, it's spelled wrong on one of them. Starlets, said Chateau Renaud, we'll say Renaud, are only found in the Volga. And, said Cavalcanti, I know that Lake Fissaro alone supplies lampreys of that size. Exactly. One comes from the Volga, and the other from Lake Fissaro. Impossible, cried all the guests simultaneously. Well, this is just what amuses me, said Monte Cristo. I am like Nero, Cupiter impossibilium, and that is what is amusing you at this moment. This fish, which seems so exquisite to you, is very likely no better than perch or salmon, but it seemed impossible to procure it, and here it is. But how could you have these fish brought to France? Oh, nothing more easy. Each fish was brought over in a cask, one filled with river herbs and weeds, the other with rushes and lake plants. They were placed in a wagon built on purpose, and thus the sterlet lived 12 days, the lamprey 8, and both were alive when my cook seized them, killing one with milk and the other with wine. You do not believe me, M. Danglars. I cannot help doubting, answered Danglars with his stupid smile. Baptistine, said the Count, have the other fish brought in, the sterlet and the lamprey which came in the other casks, and which are yet alive. Danglars opened his bewildered eyes. The company clapped their hands. 4 servants carried in 2 casks covered with aquatic plants, and in each of which was breathing a fish similar to those on the table. But why have 2 of each sort? Asked Danglars. Merely because one might have died, carelessly answered Monte Cristo. You are certainly an extraordinary man, said Danglars, and philosophers may well say it is a fine thing to be rich. And to have ideas, added Madame Danglars. Oh, do not give me credit for this, madame. It was done by the Romans, who much esteemed them, and Pliny relates that they sent slaves from Ostia to Rome, who carried on their heads fish, which he calls the mulus, and which, from the description, must probably be the goldfish. It was also considered a luxury to have them alive, it being an amusing sight to see them die, for when dying they change color 3 or 4 times, and like the rainbow, when it disappears, pass through all the prismatic shades, after which they were sent to the kitchen. Their agony formed part of their merit. If they were not seen alive, they were despised when dead. Yes, said Debray, but then Ostia is only a few leagues from Rome. True, said Monte Cristo, but what would be the use of living 1800 years after Lucullus, if we can do no better than he could? The 2 Cavalcanti opened their enormous eyes, but had the good sense not to say anything. All this is very extraordinary, said Chateau Renaud. Still, what I admire the most, I confess, is the marvelous promptitude with which your orders are executed. Is it not true that you only bought this house 5 or 6 days ago? Certainly not longer. Well, I am sure it is quite transformed since last week. If I remember rightly, it had another entrance, and the courtyard was paved and empty, while today we have a splendid lawn, bordered by trees which appear to be 100 years old. Why not? I am fond of grass and shade, said Monte Cristo. Yes, said Madame de Villefort, The door was towards the road before, and on the day of my miraculous escape, you brought me into the house from the road. I remember. Yes, madame, said Monte Cristo, but I preferred having an entrance which would allow me to see the Bois de Boulogne. The Bois, I think Bois is water, de Boulogne. So it's something lake or river or something. Allow me to see the Bois de Boulogne over my gate. In 4 days, said Morel. It is extraordinary. Indeed, said Chateau Renaud. It seems quite miraculous to make a new house out of an old one, for it was very old, and dull, too. I recollect coming for my mother to look at it when M. de Saint Méran advertised it for sale 2 or 3 years ago. M. de Saint Méran, said Madame de Villefort. Then this house belonged to M. de Saint Méran before you bought it. It appears so, replied Monte Cristo. Is it possible that you do not know of whom you purchased it? Quite so. My steward transacts all this business for me. It is certainly 10 years since the house had been occupied, said Chateau Renaud, and it was quite melancholy to look at it, with the blinds closed, the doors locked, and the weeds in the court. Really, if the house had not belonged to the father-in-law of the procureur, whom one might have thought it some accursed place where a horrible crime had been committed. Villefort, who had hitherto not tasted the 3 or 4 glasses of rare wine which were placed before him, here took one and drank it off. Monte Cristo allowed a short time to elapse, and then said, It is singular, Baron, but the same idea came across me the first time I came here. It looked so gloomy, I should never have thought it if my steward had not taken the matter into his own hands. Perhaps the fellow had been bribed by the notary. It is probable, stammered out Villefort, trying to smile, but I can assure you that I had nothing to do with any such proceeding. This house is part of Valentine's marriage portion, and M. de Saint Méran wished to sell it, for if it had remained another year or 2 uninhabited, it would have fallen to ruin. It was Morel's turn to become pale. There was, above all, one room, continued Monte Cristo, very plain in appearance, hung with red damask, which I know not why, appeared to me quite dramatic. Why so? Said Danglars. Why dramatic? Can we account for instinct? Said Monte Cristo. Are there not some places where we seem to breathe sadness? Why, we cannot tell. It is a chain of recollections, an idea which carries you back to other times, to other places, which very likely have no connection with the present time and place. And there is something in this room which reminds me forcibly of the chamber of the Marquis de Ganges or Desdemona. And there is a star there, so I guess we'll read that. Elizabeth de Rossan, Marquis de Ganges, was one of the famous women of the court of Louis XIV, where she was known as La Belle Provençale. She was the widow of the Marquis. That's weird, because usually Marquis is for a woman and Marquise is for a dude. I thought. I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. She was the widow of the Marquis de Castellane when she married de Ganges, and having the misfortune to excite the enmity of her new brothers-in-law, was forced by them to take poison, and they finished her off with pistol and dagger. Charming. Happy Harvest Month. And there is something in this room which reminds me forcibly of the chamber of the Marquis de Ganges or Desdemona. Stay, since we have finished dinner. Oh, they finished dinner. I will show it to you, and then we will take coffee in the garden. After dinner, the play. Monte Cristo looked inquiringly at his guests. Madame de Villefort rose, Monte Cristo did the same, and the rest followed their example. Villefort and Madame Danglars remained for a moment, as if rooted to their seats. They questioned each other with vague and stupid glances. Did you hear? Said Madame Danglars. We must go, replied Villefort, offering his arm. The others, attracted by curiosity, were already scattered in different parts of the house, for they thought the visit would not be limited to the one room, and that, at the same time, they would obtain a view of the rest of the building, of which Monte Cristo had created a palace. Each one went out by the open doors. Monte Cristo waited for the 2 who remained. Then, when they had passed, he brought up the rear. And on his face was a smile, which, if they could have understood it, would have alarmed them much more than a visit to the room they were about to enter. They began by walking through the apartments, many of which were fitted up in the Eastern style, with cushions and divans instead of beds, and pipes instead of furniture. The drawing rooms were decorated with the rarest pictures by the old masters, The boudoirs hung with draperies from China, of fanciful colors, fantastic design, and wonderful texture. At length they arrived at the famous room. There was nothing particular about it, excepting that, although daylight had disappeared, it was not lighted, and everything in it was old-fashioned, while the rest of the rooms had been redecorated. These two causes were enough to give it a gloomy aspect. "Oh," cried Madame de Villefort, "it is really frightful." Madame Danglars tried to utter a few words, but was not heard. Many observations were made, the import of which was a unanimous opinion that there was something sinister about the room. "Is it not so?" asked Monte Cristo. "Look at that large clumsy bed, hung with such gloomy, blood-colored drapery, and those two crayon portraits that have faded from the dampness. Do they not seem to say, with their pale lips and staring eyes, 'We have seen'?" Villefort became livid. Madame Danglars fell into a long seat placed near the chimney. "Oh," said Madame de Villefort, smiling, "are you courageous enough to sit down upon the very seat perhaps upon which the crime was committed?" Madame Danglars rose suddenly. "And then," said Monte Cristo, "this is not all." "What, is there more?" said Debray, who had not failed to notice the agitation of Madame Danglars. "Ah, what else is there?" said Danglars, "for at present I cannot say that I have seen anything extraordinary. What do you say, M. Cavalcanti?" "Ah," said he, "we have at Pisa Ugolino's tower, at Ferrara Tasso's prison, at Rimini the room of Francesca and Paolo." "Yes, but you have not this little staircase," said Monte Cristo, opening a door concealed by the drapery. "Look at it, and tell me what you think of it." "What a wicked-looking, crooked staircase," said Chateau Renaud, with a smile. "I do not know whether the wine of Chios produces melancholy, but certainly everything appears to me black in this house," said Debray. Ever since Valentine's, we'll just go with Valentine. Valentine's dowry had been mentioned, Morrel had been silent and sad. "Can you imagine," said Monte Cristo, "some Othello or Abbe de Ganges, one stormy, dark night, descending these stairs step by step, carrying a load which he wishes to hide from the sight of man, if not from God?" Madame Danglars half fainted on the arm of Villefort, who was obliged to support himself against the wall. "Ah, madame," cried Debray, "what is the matter with you? How pale you look!" "It is very evident what is the matter with her," said Madame de Villefort. "M. de Monte Cristo is relating horrible stories to us, doubtless intending to frighten us to death." "Yes," said Villefort, "really, Count, you frighten the ladies." "What is the matter?" asked Debray in a whisper of Madame Danglars. "Nothing," she replied with a violent effort. "I want air, that is all." "Will you come into the garden?" said Debray, advancing towards the back staircase. "No, no," she answered, "I would rather remain here." "Are you really frightened, madame?" said Monte Cristo. "Oh no, sir," said Madame Danglars, "but you suppose scenes in a manner which gives them the appearance of reality." "Ah, yes," said Monte Cristo, smiling, "it is all a matter of imagination. Why should we not imagine this the apartment of an honest mother, and this bed with red hangings, a bed visited by the goddess Lucina, and that mysterious staircase, the passage through which, not to disturb their sleep, the doctor and nurse pass, or even the father carrying the sleeping child?" Here Madame Danglars, instead of being calmed by the soft picture, uttered a groan and fainted. "Madame Danglars is ill," said Villefort. "It would be better to take her to her carriage." "Oh, mon Dieu," said Monte Cristo, "and I have forgotten my smelling bottle." "I have mine," said Madame de Villefort, and she passed over to Monte Cristo a bottle full of the same kind of red liquid whose good properties the Count had tested on Edward. "Ah," said Monte Cristo, taking it from her hand. "Yes," she said, "at your advice I have made the trial." "And have you succeeded?" "I think so." Madame Danglars was carried into the adjoining room. Monte Cristo dropped a very small portion of the red liquid upon her lips. She returned to consciousness. "Ah," she cried, "what a frightful dream!" Villefort pressed her hand to let her know it was not a dream. They looked for M. Danglars, but as he was not especially interested in poetical ideas, he had gone into the garden, and was talking with Major Cavalcanti on the projected railway from Leghorn to Florence. Monte Cristo seemed in despair. He took the arm of Madame Danglars and conducted her into the garden, where they found Danglars taking coffee between the Cavalcanti. "Really, madame," he said, "did I alarm you much?" "Oh, no, sir," she answered, "but you know, things impress us differently, according to the mood of our minds." Villefort forced a laugh. "And then, you know," he said, "an idea, a supposition, is sufficient." "Well," said Monte Cristo, "you may believe me if you like, but it is my opinion that a crime has been committed in this house." "Take care," said Madame de Villefort. "The king's attorney is here." "Ah," replied Monte Cristo, "since that is the case, I will take advantage of his presence to make my declaration." "Your declaration?" said Villefort. "Yes, before witnesses." "Oh, this is very interesting," said Debray. "If there really has been a crime, we will investigate it." "There has been a crime," said Monte Cristo. "Come this way, gentlemen. Come, M. Villefort, for a declaration to be available should be made before the competent authorities." He then took Villefort's arm, and at the same time, holding that of Madame Danglars under his own, he dragged the procureur to the plantain tree, where the shade was thickest. All the other guests followed. "Stay," said Monte Cristo, "here, in this very spot," and he stamped upon the ground. "I had the earth dug up and fresh mold put in to refresh these old trees. Well, my man digging found a box, or rather the iron work of a box, in the midst of which was the skeleton of a newly born infant." Monte Cristo felt the arm of Madame Danglars stiffen, while that of Villefort trembled. "A newly born infant," repeated Debray. "This affair becomes serious." "Well," said Château Renaud, "I was not wrong just now, then, when I said that houses had souls and faces like men, and that their exteriors carried the impress of their characters. This house was gloomy because it was remorseful. It was remorseful because it concealed a crime." "Who said it was a crime?" asked Villefort, with a last effort. "How? Is it not a crime to bury a living child in a garden?" cried Monte Cristo. "And pray, what do you call such an action?" "But who said it was buried alive? Why bury it there if it were dead? This garden has never been a cemetery." "What is done to infanticides in this country?" asked Major Cavalcanti innocently. "Oh, their heads are soon cut off," said Danglars. "Ah, indeed," said Cavalcanti. "I think so. Am I not right, M. de Villefort?" asked Monte Cristo. "Yes, Count," replied Villefort, in a voice now scarcely human. Monte Cristo, seeing that the two persons for whom he had prepared this scene could scarcely endure it, and not wishing to carry it too far, said, "Come, gentlemen, some coffee, we seem to have forgotten it," and he conducted the guests back to the table on the lawn. "Indeed, Count," said Madame Danglars, "I am ashamed to own it, but all your frightful stories have so upset me that I must beg you to let me sit down," and she fell into a chair. Monte Cristo bowed, and went to Madame de Villefort. "I think Madame Danglars again requires your bottle," he said. But before Madame de Villefort could reach her friend, the procureur had found time to whisper to Madame Danglars, "I must speak to you." "When?" "Tomorrow." "Where?" "In my office, or in the court if you like. That is the surest place." "I will be there." At this moment, Madame de Villefort approached. "Thanks, my dear friend," said Madame Danglars, trying to smile. "It is over now, and I am much better." Well, that took a turn I wasn't expecting. um, yeah. So any of the good dinner stuff was, yeah, it was. It was kind of up in the, yeah, we went back into Spoopvember a little bit there. Um, and I don't really have much else, apart from, yeah, there's some, yeah, basically just like little quotes and whatever. Oh, this one was actually quite good. Hang on. This, yeah, let me see if I can find the good stuff. Yeah, so there's the old-fashioned Thanksgiving, and yeah, ads. Boo ads. Um, Duncan's. Oh, there was a good one. Where was it? Well, according to Tolkien, noshing on cram was more of a chewing exercise than actual eating, nutritious though it was. Humbler meals was good. Oh, sweet. So here's the narrator of Moby Dick rhapsodizing a steaming bowl of clam chowder. "Oh, sweet friends, hearken to me. It was made of small, juicy clams, scarcely bigger than hazelnuts, mixed with pounded ship biscuits and salted pork cut up into little flakes, the whole enriched with butter and plentifully seasoned with pepper and salt. If that has your tummy rumbling, you probably don't want to be reminded about the sausages in the silver chair by C.S. Lewis. Spicy ones, fat and piping hot and burst, and just the tiniest bit burnt. Who but the creator of Narnia could make a sausage so magical? The perfect New York pretzel, the dough toasted to perfection, the twist salted with a light, sticky snow. And don't forget the lasso of mustard. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of all I got. I thought it was gonna take a lot longer. But that's all I've got for now. So I hope that got you in the festive food mood. Yeah. So the old-fashioned Thanksgiving, excellent. I feel like I've read it before. Still good, always good. And then yeah, Count of Monte Cristo. There are better descriptions. I mean, it was great, but it didn't quite have like the richness to it. Like there was slight descriptions there, but I think probably the richer descriptions were probably earlier in the book. And then yeah, just the way food can be described to make you hungry, the mouth wateringness and all that. So good. Good writing, great writing. And that was the intent and attempt of this even. So yeah, so that's all I got. Sunday we're gonna finish all the fingers crossed Ghosty, because I found out what I did wrong, what I was missing. So it's it'll be doing the thing that we missed, or that I missed, and then going and doing the boss, which will not take too much time, and then getting to the final boss, and then that's it. And that should be it, and then we're done with Ghosty. Yeah. And then Tuesday, we'll be flying again. Hopefully I will continue trying to actually get some proper controlled that sim flying. And then probably potentially more complex practice. I even thought about trying to do the IFR with the complex aircraft, but then I was like, no, I'm not used to the G1000, so that's just not gonna work. So we'll just do what we're doing now. The weather is just not it's upsetting. I've had to cancel like the entire week or been canceled on because of weather. So hopefully it's gonna kind of settle out a little bit and not be so questionable. So yeah, and then yeah. So next Thursday, I will be off, and we'll see about the Sunday after that. If we do the Sunday after that, it'll probably be Minecraft. And then after that, we'll be starting Christmas theme. Yay! I'm so excited. Hope weather improves. I do too. Yeah, it has. It's been like low ceilings plus like high winds, and then plus like yeah, low visibility. So not only like the low ceilings, but also like the low visibility, which is something that I'm starting to understand a bit better. So yeah, so thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm sorry it's not as long as it usually was. I totally anticipated it going longer. Alas, sometimes it's okay to do a slightly shorter stream, especially if I have nothing left. So I do. Whoever got lost and found their way here or found their way back, thanks for being here. I hope your call went well or is going well. And hope you enjoyed. Hope it got you somewhat in the festive sort of spirit. And hope to see you again soon. Have a great whatever it's gonna be for you. I think that's it. So if I've forgotten anything, I'm sorry. Brain as always is mush, rubbing 2/8 of a brain cell together. So yeah. Until next time, thank you very much, and bye.